Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer, and today I want to go over my 5 most anticipated upcoming campaigns that I expect to launch sometime in the next year. This is a continuation of my video from last week where I went over 5 campaigns as well, but those ones were more focused on the immediate future and games that I expect to launch in early 2024. In this one, I'm removing that limitation, and although there were some really exciting games in that video, this one I think takes it up to the next level, and there's going to be games here that probably you haven't even heard of yet because a lot of these were only just announced, and one of these I'm not even sure if it's going to exist at all, but I think there's a very good chance. In last week's video, I did include some expansions and reprints as part of those most anticipated games, but in this one, I'm going to be trying to keep it to brand new games only, except for this first one here because it is the one that I'm the most excited about, and I think a lot of you might be as well, so I did want to make an exception here, and I guess we can just jump straight into it because back in 2020, we had a campaign offering a deluxeified version of a little-known game called Kemet. And Kemet is one of a trio of games offered originally by Matago Games that covered 3 distinct ancient mythologies, but all offered area control. And all 3 of these games are really well loved in the industry and have fantastic reviews and ratings on Board Game Geek. And like I said, this deluxeified version of Kemet was launched back in 2020, and this one was launched by Matago Games. But then just earlier this year, we had a deluxeified version of Cyclades. This one wasn't actually run by Matago Games, so I don't really know the relationship here between Matago and Open Sesame Games, but this is the exact same game with updated artwork and a few new additions as well. And where Kemet was focused more on Egyptian mythology, Cyclades focused more on ancient Greek mythology. But these are only 2 out of the 3 games that have had a deluxe edition so far, and I do think that we are going to be seeing a deluxe version for Inish very, very soon, most likely within the next year. Inish is a fantastic game where players are going to be doing most of their actions through playing different cards and drafting those cards each and every round, so that players are going to be having different actions available to them depending on what they draft. But then you also know what the other players might have, except for 1 card because there's always 1 card removed each and every round. There's also other cards that you can get in addition to these action cards, and there's also 3 different ways that you can win the game. And a cool thing about the way that Inish works is that when you are about to accomplish the win condition, you have to use an action to draw a specific token to indicate to all the other players that you're about to win the game. This is really great because it basically broadcasts to all the other players that they should probably be trying to stop you. And for the theme on this one, Inish is focused on Celtic mythology, which I think is awesome because it's an area that's not quite explored as much as the other 2 games, so it is the theme that I'm the most interested in. But these 3 games all play very, very different from each other, so they're all worth trying if you do get the chance, or if you are a huge fan of area control. Well, you've probably already played all 3 of them, or you might already own all 3 of them, but I think there is a reason to own each one of these. I don't think any one is going to replace the other, although some you might like more than the others, and some you might not like at all. I am very confident that there will be a campaign for this game, but I don't think anyone else is really going to be talking about it right now because there just isn't very much information. But the information I was able to dig up does look very promising. What's funny here is that back in 2022, Matago put a listing on Board Game Geek for the Inish Big Box, and then they never actually released it. Going through a bit of the discussion here in the forums, Matago actually says that they have 2 more expansions coming for this game, and they also mentioned that they had another project in mind that they're going to be focusing on first. Well, they've already completed that project as well as 1 more, so I think the chance of their next campaign being a new version of Inish is very, very good. And it is possible that they end up offering these expansions without deluxifying or doing any sort of reprint of the original game, and it is possible that they don't even bring these expansions to crowdfunding. There is a bit of speculation with this one because there hasn't been any confirmation one way or the other, but if I was a betting man, and I am confident enough in this one that I would put money that they would be releasing a new version of the game, and I'm confident enough to put it in this video. And my next most anticipated game is another one that doesn't have a whole lot of info on it yet, but this is also one that will be coming eventually because it is confirmed, But like I said, there's not a whole lot of info on the web, so we're actually going to be diving into one of my emails because this was just provided on one of the updates to the Oathsworn campaign. But Shadowborn Games has been working on an Oathsworn 2, and I don't think it's going to be called Oathsworn 2. I think that's just their project name for it right now because it's so early in the process. But they do want this to be a successor to that game, and I assume it's going to be working in very similar ways to that original game. They're going to be building off that core system, probably making some improvements and streamlining, and then offering you a completely different experience. On their website, underneath future projects, they do also have this image here focusing more on a Arthurian theme, and it's possible that this could be what they're referring to as Oathsworn 2, but I'm almost 99% sure that it's not, because this one we do have a little bit of information on so far, and this one is actually going to be an area control game, and this should also be included in my 5 games that I'm anticipating for this video, because this is another one that I'm definitely really excited to check out. But since these are by the same publisher here, I'm just going to group these together as one and just give you a bit of a bonus game here. But if you're not familiar with Oathsworn, this is a cooperative campaign game where players are going to be alternating through a city and settlement phase and then a boss battler phase. During the city phase, players are going to be exploring the city, progressing the story, making different decisions, and preparing for battle and gathering information that can help them along the way. Players can only do this for so long before eventually you're going to be forced into battle against one of the many monsters offered in this game. And this is a game that offers a ton of variability because there are a bunch of different characters that you can play as, each with their own unique abilities and decks of cards that can all be upgraded in different ways from game to game depending on what you want to prioritize. And then, like I said, there's a bunch of decisions that you're going to be making throughout the story that can change the trajectory of the story. And then players can also discover different items and weapons that they can add to their inventory, with more and more powerful items being added as you progress throughout the game. And this is a huge game with miniatures that don't need to be this big, but they are, and honestly I really don't mind because I think it does add to the environment and the grim atmosphere that this game offers. And I also don't mind being a little frivolous with the plastic when a game actually deserves it. And this game has lasted the test of time. I've only seen positive things said about it by those that have played the game. And I'm really not surprised because they did such an excellent job with the way that they designed this game, because you can just play the whole experience if you want, but they gave you so many different ways to pare it down if you want to make it a bit more accessible. There is a foreteller app that will do all the narrative for you that does a fantastic job, and you can also play this game just skipping over the city phases and going through a few steps to kind of get a similar outcome, but then have you go through the game a lot faster. Really amazing work here. I'm really excited to see an Oathsworn 2 in the works. I'm sure it'll come with some big changes, but of course I will be talking about all these games in more detail when there is more information, so as always, just make sure to subscribe down below. And my next most anticipated game here is actually 3 different games, but I'm just going to group them all together because they either share a designer or a publisher. And I know I am cheating a bit here because this is just supposed to be my top 5 most anticipated campaigns. But we get more games here to look forward to, so is anyone actually going to complain about that? But as you may have noticed, Garphill Games has been wrapping up their South Tigris series, which means that they're moving on to their next project. And I don't think this next one's going to be a trilogy because they are calling it their Ancient Anthology of Games, and there's already 2 that they have announced. There's the Anarchy as well as Skara Brae. And although I really do respect Garphill Games and the games that they've accomplished, and I don't deny that they have some fantastic ideas and designs, but for myself, most of them have just had a bit too much going on and a little bit too many decisions out at once for my personal taste in board games. But there has been a few of their games that I really enjoy, and it's usually been the ones that, well, are a little bit simpler. Hadrian's Wall is actually one I haven't had the privilege to play yet, and it's also one that I really do want to play. But what's interesting about this next one that they have called the Anarchy is that they do compare it to Hadrian's Wall. It is going to feature a similar engine building mechanism that you see in Hadrian's Wall, but in this one you're going to have a little bit more control and decisions to make when it comes to building up that engine. Looks like this game's actually going to be offering a few different scenarios, giving you some different types of setups that you can try from game to game as players compete against each other, building up their kingdom and building up their domain to try and prove themselves the most worthy to the king. Of course, strength is always a reputable trait, so there will be a lot of combat as well. Not a whole lot of info on this game beyond that, but they did do a live stream where they announced this game and talk about a few of the mechanics, and I will leave a link to that video in the description below if you do want to check it out. But also mentioned in that video was Skara Brae, which they had compared more to games like Legacy of You or their new Shipwrights Redux version of the game, which does get me pretty excited about this game because it means that this one is not going to be as crazy as a lot of their other games. Some of the main mechanisms in this one are going to be drafting and worker placement, and also there is going to be a bit of a survival element as well because players are going to be building up their settlement, gathering food and resources and crafting different items, but then as their settlement grows bigger and bigger, that's going to require more resources to feed and maintain and, well, keep safe and clean. Of these two games, this is the one that I'm the most interested in because it does sound like a bit of a lighter weight game, and for Garphill games that doesn't mean that this is going to be a light game by any means, but it also does sound a little bit like Agricola, which is one of my favorite games of all time, and I do still have some issues with it, so I'm always excited to see some alternatives come to the table. But whether that assessment is accurate or not, we'll just have to wait and see, so as always, just make sure to subscribe down below because I will go into these games in a lot more detail during the weeks of their launch. And I did say that there were 3 games here, and I'm not going to be going into this third one quite as much, but the reason that I'm also including this one as part of this mix, even though this is from a completely different publisher, is because it is still designed by Shem Phillips. And in this one, players are competing to earn the most prestige in a land that is surrounded by a perpetual storm. Players are going to be salvaging wreck sites, fulfilling contracts, acquiring crew, upgrading and fixing up their vehicles, and earning medals by completing different objectives. There is a bit of information out on this one already, as well as a few videos with some people giving you some sneak peeks into how it plays. So if you are interested in this one, you can go ahead and search for that on YouTube, but I will leave a link to this page in the description below as well. And this next most anticipated is actually my most anticipated for the entirety of the next year. I know I said that Inish wore that crown, but I didn't think about this one until I got here, so now I'm telling you. But this is also one that I think all of you should be super excited about, and all of you should be trying to attend, because this is the Level Up event, and this can be offered in February from February 2nd to the 4th. And I do have a coupon code for any of you that are interested in attending. This is hosted by Alex over at Board Game Co., but there's also going to be a bunch of different guests as well, and I will be among those guests. So if you want to meet me, or if you want to meet any of these other cool people that are going to be attending the event, you'll definitely want to check it out, and I will have a link to that in the description below. But don't worry, I still will be giving you 2 more of my most anticipated games for the upcoming year. And the first of those remaining 2 is going to be the new Diablo board game, and this one is actually going to be featuring a role-playing game as well. So if you're interested in RPGs, or if you're just interested in board games, there are options for you to experience this game. But what's interesting about that is that both of these can be integrated with the other. So if you want to use components of the board game in order to augment your RPG, that can be done, but you can also use components of the RPG to augment the board game. And I think it does make sense because the board game does feature some amount of role-playing in it as well, so I think that's kind of where this bridging is going to happen. The board game will be a cooperative narrative adventure where players will be able to build up their characters and venture through the world to help those in need. And of course, there will be a lot of fighting of monsters throughout many different dungeons, but that's just about all we know about this game so far. Well, other than it is based on the video game with the same name, so if you are a fan of the franchise, or if you've played a lot of those games, you can probably get a good idea of what to expect. This is actually one of the few games that I haven't played, so I don't have any witty commentary for this one, other than I'm just really surprised I've never played this game, given how popular it is. And for the 5th most anticipated game in the next year, well, I couldn't really settle on a single one very solidly, so I'm going to be giving you a few of the contenders here, but I think of those contenders, the one that most interests me is Wroth by Chip Theory Games. And I say interests me very loosely here because there just isn't a whole lot of information, other than it is a faction-driven area control game where players are going to be doing dice drafting. Chip Theory has some fantastic games that they've released previously, but all of them have just been a little too grandiose for me, or just a little bit too much going on or just a little too solo focused. Other than Burn Cycle, which I 100% should have backed, and it's one of my biggest regrets. But Chip Theory Games has just proven again and again that they can create fantastic designs for the target audience of that game. Unfortunately for me, most of their games I haven't really fell into that target audience, but for Wroth it looks like a game that I would seriously enjoy, and I'm really excited to hear more on it, and I'm really excited to be part of that target audience because once again, they have just proven that they can deliver, and I have no doubts that they'll be able to do that again with this one. But I did say there were a few other games contending for my most anticipated, and this was just one of them, but there are also a couple titles already announced by CMON, with the first one being a God of War board game, and they're going to be spinning off from their God of War card game. I don't think that there's going to be any shared mechanisms between them. I think they are just using the relationship that they already established with that card game in order to allow them to expand on that IP in a new way. There's really not any info out for this one just yet, but you can see a couple of the miniatures here, and I do expect this one to play a little bit like the game, probably following a few different missions in an overarching story as players build and upgrade their characters, and also discover many intimidating allies and enemies along the way. But CMON does also have another game in preview on Kickstarter, and this one's called Degenesis Clan Wars, and this one looks most similar to their previous game Hate. So if you were interested in that game, this one might be one that you'll want to check out. But in this one, it's going to be offering a semi-cooperative experience as players are going to be playing through different missions and trying to survive in a post-apocalyptic world. And another one that I'm really excited about is How to Save a World by Burnt Island Games. Burnt Island Games just makes so many games that I absolutely love. They always do a fantastic job. And I don't know too much about this game, but I know it was played at PAX Unplugged, so I wish I could have made it. But I'm really excited to see some videos on this one or to hear a little bit more on the gameplay. But just knowing that this comes from Burnt Island Games is enough to get me excited. Other than that, I do just want to make a few honorable mentions. We have EVE Online coming up, and there are already a few EVE board games out already, but if those ones weren't to your liking, there is this one. And we do have a reprint coming for Colosseum on Gamefound, and this one is designed by Wolfgang Kramer. And then we do also have Terraria coming to the board game space. This is a very popular indie video game, and it's always fun to see these indie games make their way into board games. And finally, this list wouldn't be complete without at least one train game, and we do have one coming from Martin Wallace called Steam Power. I'll leave a link to all of these in the description below if you want to check out any of these in more detail. But that is my list of 5 and a few extra most anticipated games that I expect to launch in the next year. And I do say all this very, very loosely because it's really hard to anticipate a game launching in the next week, let alone in the next year. So some of these games might be pushed off. Some of them might not even happen at all, but I am pretty confident in these ones, so we'll see what happens. And if nothing else, this was at least just a bit of fun, and I hope you enjoyed the content. And I did have a couple options for videos this week, and this one was voted by my Ko-fi subscribers, and it won by a whopping 1 vote. That's not exactly how I was hoping this to go, because this means that I pretty much just did what half of my subscribers wanted and then didn't do what the other half wanted just because of a single vote. But I guess that's how politics works, so if it's good enough for that, it must be good enough for this. But at the very least, I will try to make this other video here as well, just because it was such a close draw here. I don't know when or how I'll find the time, because I know once we hit January, it's just going to get crazy here, and I know my week off for Christmas is going to go by faster than I want it to, and I already have so many other things I need to get done in that time, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing a video next week, but I'll at least post something and share some information if I have anything exciting to announce. But at the very least, just know that I wish you all a very happy holidays, no matter what you celebrate over this time of the year. But one thing we all have in common is these board games, so I hope you all get in some fantastic games. I have a few that I'll be bringing over to play with my siblings tomorrow, and I'm really excited for that. And as always, thanks so much for watching, and just remember to keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.